Hey, y'all, this is Anthony Standifer. Welcome back. We are here at another episode of Driving the Business, Beauty Brands and Entrepreneurship with me, Anthony Standifer. This is episode 39. I'm super excited as we went on this awkward and ambitious journey towards launching this podcast again and really providing value. In today's episode, we've got a topic that is super relevant to those that are building their empires and have a desire to really expand and grow their beauty vision. How do you properly go and enter into big box retailers, particularly when you've been a direct to consumer brand? It is a journey that across my 27-year journey inside of the beauty space that I have seen go well for some and then horribly cumbersome for most. But there's some rules and some really simple things that I think we should be thinking about as beauty brand founders. And so lean in. If this is something that is on your heart and in your mind to do, there is a clear roadmap by which you can use to follow and enter retailer and looking at this issue not just as a brand founder, but from the lens of an actual retail buyer. So today's episode, let's lean in, let's go. It's our next episode. I'm excited to have you join, and we are going to get down to the business.
The business. Driving. Driving. Driving the business.
Anthony Standifer here, and you are driving the business. So as we talk about this topic of getting ready for retail, like who am I and why should you be listening to me is probably the question. My name again is Anthony Standifer. I have been in this beauty and personal care industry now for going on 27 years. So I think I can aptly call myself one of the OGs, or at least somebody that's had a good number of experiences and have sold here in the US and abroad to most major retailers. And so that's included everybody from the Walmarts, the Targets, to the Sephoras, the Ultas of the world. And understanding from inside of my corporate America experience and now as the owner of a manufacturing facility that also supports small businesses, I've seen the nuances of what retailers are looking for, but I've also sat in the back seat with a ton of brand founders who are making this really courageous jump from being a direct-to-consumer brand to being and going into big box retailers. And it's a bumpy ride. I mean, inside of my experience as a manufacturer, 100% of my customers who've made that transition have had a rocky go at it. And that is from the big brands that we've been fortunate to support to the small brands that we've also supported in their transition. So when I give this context, it's under the auspices of what I've actually seen brand founders navigating. And my hope is that by giving you this little cheat sheet, that you'll have awareness. And within that awareness, you'll be better prepared for your own brand journey. And you're not going to completely absolve yourself of experiencing some of this turbulence, but you'll at least be prepared. And so knowledge is power, and knowing what you're getting into is a good part of the battle. So lean in, take some notes, and really start thinking about what your own brand journey could be as you navigate forward. So I'm going to present you with a number of issues and things that you need to consider as a brand founder. I want to give context early on. This episode is not, and this information is not intended to be a discouragement. I mean, there's a lot of things to be prepared for. And quite honestly, if we give people the cheat sheet to life, most people won't want to live. Because they'll see all of the potential outcomes of what could go wrong and then get discouraged for taking the journey. However, there is some really great value in knowing ahead of time the things to think about. As you're entering into retail, keep in mind that your perspective as a brand founder is going to be particularly specific. I mean, you've got goals and things that you want to achieve. But guess what? Your retail partner also has goals. And those goals become gateways for deciding if and when you enter into these chains. And you need to understand as a brand founder, what is the buyer and what is the retailer expecting of you as a brand founder, and how or if you can align your objectives with their objectives. So let's lay it out. I mean, it's a really simple plan with 3 to 4 boxes to consider from a overall brand perspective and the retail perspective as well. We're going to view this now from the retailer perspective. So there's 4 things that they're likely looking at when they consider brands on their shelves. First and foremost, retail businesses are businesses. They are maximized and built with profit in mind from the onset. And retailers make their profit from the brands and the products that they offer on their shelves. And so shelf productivity is always number one at the forefront of any decision that the retailer or the retail buyer is making. So be prepared to deal with that. Like, how productive can you make their shelves with your brand's presence? Pricing is the other metric by which retailers are optimizing for, and keeping in mind that they understand that their retail buyer and that their consumer that's going into their stores is shopping at a specific price point within a range, but really very specific price points. Example, the folks that shop at Walmart are spending, when they go in on an average basket, decidedly different amounts than the person who goes into Sephora. I think we can all agree to that. And so there's a reason why products that you find at Sephora, you're not going to necessarily see on the shelves at Walmart, because these are two distinct buyer segments that are being serviced by two different retailers. And you understanding as a brand founder, when you think about your pricing, and you know pricing is one of my favorite topics, is to understand where does your pricing fit and match best with which potential retailer. It's something that you've got to be mindful of from the very, very beginning. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've had a conversation with a brand founder about their pricing. And I'm a huge advocate of selling at premium prices as a small business owner. But you recognize that when you start the journey into retail, your pricing is going to have to align with your potential retail buyer. In aligning that pricing with your potential retail partner, you as a brand founder may have to make concessions. And so it's not uncommon for a retail buyer to say, like, hey, I like your brand, but I need that pricing to come down on these particular items about $3 in order to be compatible with the retailer's expectations for pricing to their end consumer. And a $3 shift in retail price can be huge for the margin impacts that are going to happen for you as a brand founder. And so you got to know, where does your brand fit? Because in making these decisions, it ultimately determines the profitability of your brand. And that's something you just can't sacrifice on. I mean, you've got to be militantly diligent about maintaining and protecting the profit of your business. And the moment you transfer from direct to consumer business into a retail based business, your margins as a brand founder get cut drastically, because everyone is looking to make money in this business, and retailers specifically are designed to protect profit at all cost. And so for that reason, they price their products at a way that they ensure they make their margin, but they're also encouraging the customer to purchase at a price that is accessible for them. And if their customer base is not used to buying $20 shampoos, then your product and your $20 shampoo is not likely to get a green light to come onto their shelves until you make a significant price reduction. So, I am pretty militant about the fact that brand founders should be making 50, 60% gross margin at a basement. Like 60% is the floor that you should be operating when you're selling directly to consumers. The moment you decide to go to a retailer, you can no longer make that 60% margin. And so your pricing is going to have to get reduced. And this is rough math, but it's not, it's a general guide. If your product is designed to sell at $16 retail price, your retailer is going to expect to buy that product anywhere between $8 to $10 in order for them to mark it up and make the appropriate margin that they're looking to make. And so you now have to factor in your cost of goods and selling for $8 to $10 instead of selling for 16. And that hit is one that is going to be drastic. And the illusion that brand founders make in the early days is thinking that I'm going to sell so much more product that it's going to make up the dollars that I was making selling directly to consumer. But it is not necessarily true in the beginning. You have to build your business at retail. And so recovering that lost margin is a hard pill to swallow, but something that you have to think about from a long-term journey perspective. You may not recoup those dollars for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but can your business survive at those lower margins while you're building volume and velocity inside of a retail partner? So it's a strategic, complicated discussion, but one that you have to be really thoughtful about as a brand founder when you think about pricing. But just recognize it's the same discussion happening from two different perspectives: yours as a brand founder, and then your retail partner as your official retailer. The next topic that we have to look at when we talk about one topic from two different angles is supply and the physical product. Retailers are ultimately concerned with, can you keep product on their shelves at a rate and a velocity that is expected? Because here's the deal, they are going to be purchasing on a regular weekly basis from your company. And are you in position to respond to that? So here's traditionally what happens. And when you go into any retail store, you'll see this. Products are sitting on the shelves. And if you've ever gone into a retailer and seen an empty shelf or an empty spot on the shelf, then the retailer views that extremely negative, because that is someone who came into a store looking for a potential product and saw an empty shelf, and it's a missed sale opportunity. That consumers ultimately, if they really want that product, is going to go someplace else. And it's likely going to be a competitor. And so the retailer places a very, very high value on maintaining in stock status of your products. And from their perspective, they're expecting you to be ready for the orders that come when they place them with you weekly. So, in the beginning, they place an order to fill their shelves, and it's the initial pipeline distribution. It's a huge order. It's the time when brand founders celebrate because they get a big purchase order from their retailer to fill the shelves. Once the products are placed on the shelves, they then are placing weekly orders from you based on their actual movement of product at an actual store level. Some weeks that's going to be high, some weeks that's going to be low. There is no way for anyone to know what the actual velocity and movement of product is, but the absolute expectation is that you as a brand founder are prepared to respond, so that when purchase orders are placed with you on a weekly basis, you're in a spot where you can fulfill them and send it to that retailer. It's a dance. And it's a costly dance, because as a retail founder, you are now looking at supply and saying, I'm going to order 10,000 units from my supplier, hypothetical number. The first order was for 8,000 units from my retail partner. So I've got 2,000 units to play with. Well, if you run through 2,000 units in 4 weeks, great. But what happens if you run through those extra 2,000 units in 2 weeks? And it's now going to take you 4 to 6 weeks to get more product from your manufacturer. You are now in a conundrum where you have the potential to receive a purchase order from your retail partner that you can't fulfill. And you will be judged and rated based on your order fulfillment inside of any retailer that you go to. And so it places a bind, because now you're going to have to manage money and resources and decide, well, instead of making 10,000 unit orders, I'm going to place a 20,000 or 15,000 unit order with a manufacturer, and then hope that it's going to move in a timely fashion inside of the retail. Um, there's no getting around it. It is a dicey dance, and your retail partner can give you some information, but ultimately they can't tell you what the actual movement of your brand or product is going to be, and any potential spikes or dips that may happen. Because the other side of this is, you buy a bunch of product and you thinking, hey, I'm getting average orders for 1,000 units a week or 500 units a week, and then you have 3 or 4 weeks where they order 80 units per week. And you're like, wait a minute, but I have all this extra product that is sitting here on my shelves that I had to pay for from my manufacturer, and you're sending me purchase orders for 80 units a week when I'm prepared to ship you 200 units or 1,000 units a week. Having the financial backing to understand that your inventory is there and you now have to manage it as such, so that you keep your business moving and keep supply ready, is a pretty dicey thing for most retailers and for most brand founders to manage. And it's a classic problem. I mean, again, I've worked in big retailers and big brands, and seen on the brand side that the management of supply is a really challenging thing. And so if the big boys like the L'Oreals and the Estee Lauders and the Procter& and Gamble's deal with this on a really, really systemic level, there's no reason to not expect that you as a small brand founder are going to deal with the issue. However, it's magnified because your financial resources are going to be more limited than that of the big guys. So be prepared and be ready to take a risk and a bit of a gamble. So we've talked about pricing, we've talked about supply. Now let's dive into the other part of this that both the brand founder and retailers are looking at, and that is the support that's going to be necessary to maintain the brand once it's placed on shelf. Now, from the retailer perspective, they are expecting that you, brand founder, are driving people to their shelves. It is not an expectation that, oh, my retailer has placed me on shelf and they're bringing me all of these new customers so that I can build my brand. It is a common fallacy that many brand founders have in believing that because their products go on shelf, they can now build their brand and build the eyeballs that are going to discover their brand. While, yes, discovery will be part of that with new customers, the lion's share of movement that happens, particularly in the early days, it's got to be based on your demand that already exists and that you're driving to the retail shelf. And so what does that mean? That means that you as a brand founder have to be thinking about, like, how am I going to take my direct to consumer business that's probably happening online someplace or in person in a local area someplace and translate that into driving those same customers to a retail shelf across a national platform. And this gets really tricky because hypothetically, you're a brand that's based in the city that I live in, Chicago. So you're a Chicago-based brand. You've made a really great name for yourself locally, maybe within the local region that you're in. You've got an e-commerce business that's servicing several areas and you're able to ship nationally. But when you really look at your direct-to-consumer brands, you have hotspots and concentration points of where your brand primarily attracts and draws customers. Well, guess what? The moment you now move into retail, you are placed on shelves that you do not get to choose. If a retailer says yes to you, brand founder, they are now going to place you into what they believe are their best stores. Example, um, Sephora may say, okay, great, we're going to place you into our stores and on our shelves. Well, guess what? We're going to place you in the best stores that we think. And if they've got, and I'll place the number of stores that Sephora has somewhere in the notes of this video, they may say of these total stores, we're going to place you in our top 50. Well, those top 50 stores are going to span everywhere from California to New York City to somewhere down in Florida to somewhere in Ohio. We're going to put you over in Alabama. We're going to send you up to Montana because those are what they believe are their top 50 stores based on the demographic that your brand is desired to serve and what they've seen other competitive brands do. And so now you're tasked with how do you get people to go to the shelves and look for products in Montana and Florida? You're a Chicago-based brand in my example, and now you've got to figure out how to drive people into places where you may not have a strong foothold. It is a daunting task, and it is something that you've got to be prepared to do and set up with an infrastructure from your own side as a brand founder to do. And so what do I see? I see tons of founders that then do local targeted advertising. They're using their social media to then try and drive people in. But ultimately, there has to be a strategic effort put forth by you as the founder to drive people across platform to say that my brand is now available in XYZ retailer. Please go support me at these specific locations. And it's kind of crazy because you're going to make the announcement that I'm available in Sephora, and people are going to go to every Sephora location and say, well, wait a minute, I didn't see them on the shelf at that location. Well, guess what? You're only in 50 of the X number of available stores inside of that retailer. And so getting your customer on board and prepared for that journey is also part of the task. And so you can frequently give cheat sheets and directives and directions on social media about what specific stores, but ultimately your retail partner is expecting you to drive demand at the local level. And you are judged on that on a weekly basis. And so every retailer knows that, great, per SKU, this is the number of SKUs per store that this brand has moved per week. And so be prepared from the onset that you've got to be ready to support your brand. And if you're not able to do that from a brand perspective, then guess what? Your retail partner is prepared to put you into their marketing programs that allows you to then promote your brand, and that comes at a cost. And so for those that are listening, I'm rubbing my fingers together because that's where the money is and that's where the money resides. And so retailers will then give you a list of marketing programs that cost thousands of dollars to participate in with the expectation that you're going to allocate dollars to supporting the increased movement of your brand. And it's an expectation. Like it's not a, well, will you do it? It is a yes, you will. And now we need to just determine and potentially negotiate how many of these you'll participate in, because ultimately the goal is that your brand has to move at a very specific velocity or more in comparison to other brands in their section. It's a fair and an unfair benchmark in my personal opinion, because ultimately retailers are looking to move product. The moment your new indie brand, exciting, gets put on shelf, you are benchmarked against Sephora, Procter and Gamble, any other big brand that's out there, in addition to other small brands that are also newly entered on the shelf. And while you're not expected to move necessarily as much as the biggest brands, you are expected to compete at a minimum benchmark. And so, one of the questions that I often encourage my brand founders to ask, particularly of their retail partners, before they go on shelf is, well, what's the average movement expectation? Like, what's the benchmark of where I need to reach? And they can tell you that quite transparently. And then it's up to you to think about, like, how can I move that number of units everywhere from, again, New York City to Montana, in order to ensure that you're performing at the level. And the support that's going to be needed to that can't be underestimated, because it's a new level of marketing and a new level of demand creation that you'll have to enter as a brand founder. So just keep in mind that retailers are giving you access. As a brand founder, it is your job to generate and to grow demand for your specific products. And it's a matrix, a little bit like a Rubik's Cube. Once you figure it out, it is amazing, because you are able to scale, you are able to grow. But that growth and scale comes at a cost and comes over time. And so be ready to not just take your perspective as a brand founder, but ask really specific, really targeted questions of any brand partner that you potentially engage with before you sign the ink on a contract and a deal that then locks you into the expectations of that retailer, because ultimately they're the ones with the greater leverage in this instance, because they're providing access to their shelves of your brand, and the goal is that you will participate. It's a thing, y'all. I mean, I have seen um, so many brands, particularly minority-owned, woman-founded brands, over the last few years, really learn this lesson the hard way. Post 2020, there was a great influx of minority-owned, woman-owned brands that were brought into many retail shelves. It was a great flourishing time, regardless of the reasons why these retailers then all of a sudden wanted to bring in these retailers is a different discussion, but it gave us access, and it gave many of my customers access to retail distribution that they'd never had before. It is now, fast forward 4 or 5 years later, many of those brands are exiting or have exited those shelves, because given the access, several of those brands and many of them were not able to compete and not able to move at the same level as other brands. And when the benchmark is the benchmark, we don't own these retailers, so we don't get to set the expectations. When those things are not happening at the desired level, then decisions get made, and getting pushed out of a retail partner is a dramatic experience, and it's an expensive one, because before you're ever asked to leave, you are asked to spend money to support. And that pressure and that financial obligation is what drives many businesses out of business. And we've seen way too many beauty brands that are on social media right now asking for money to support their brands, or making announcements that they're closing their businesses after having had such great success in years or months prior. So, again, this is not meant to be a discouragement. It is meant to be an awareness building opportunity. Do you understand what is going to be expected of you? And my personal opinion has been, like, really shore up your direct to consumer business. Yeah, it's hard. I mean, selling directly to consumers on the e-commerce site will wear you out. And it is a grueling, daunting task. But it is a more controlled task that has less risk associated with it than the growth that happens and the leap that happens when you then start to move into formal big box retailers. So take the time, research these things, work with your retail partners. I'm excited about the fact that I own a manufacturing facility that has done this work for more than a decade now, and have had the opportunity to consult with a myriad of brands and heed the counsel and advice of others, because it matters. And learning these lessons early on is key and pivotal, because it is truly the thing that at the end can take you out if you're not prepared for it. And so I give all of this with, a grain of counsel. I won't say salt, but a grain of counsel that I hope people take advantage of and really heed to as they're making these next big bold decisions. And so as we think about this, again, let's recap on what we've talked about today. This idea of going into retail is something that should be done with careful consideration and a strategic mindset. Recognizing that the same topic is going to be looked at from two different sides, both yours and that of your potential big box retail partner. Ultimately, the retailer is concerned and you're concerned with shelf productivity. Once you're on the shelf, are you able to perform at the expected levels that your retail partner expects? Pricing is a big part of that, and making sure that your pricing aligns from the beginning with what the retail partner is expecting. In many instances, it may be a no go for your brand into a potential retail partner if the pricing model doesn't align. And as a brand, your job is to make sure that you're protecting your margin so that you can grow and scale. And if you're not making the kind of gross margins that are necessary, then it's a wall and it should be a hard no about expanding into many retail partners, but pricing is there, and big box retailers are not going to take the hit on retail margins because that's not how they operate. The next part of this is then the supply. Are you in a space where you can adequately supply the volume of product that is needed? Are you work and set up to work with your manufacturing products, that your manufacturing partners, so that if you need 5,000 units quickly, you can get it, or if you need 25,000 units, you can get it quickly. And what is the timeline associated with that? And are you prepared to pay for that product once the demand is there? From the retailer perspective, can you fulfill weekly purchase orders that are going to come directly to you, whether it's 80 units or 18,000 units? Are you in a space where you can fulfill the demand that is coming in because of the movement of your product at their shelves across a national distribution pipeline? And then the last part, support. Are you set up to support driving demand into a retailer at a national level? And that's going to be being ready to support from East Coast to West Coast, the northern part of the country to the South, and driving people at a micro level into retail stores and onto their own e-commerce platforms to really keep movement going. So lots of things to consider, but it is such a great journey. If you get the Rubik's Cube right, it unlocks great potential and great volume, but the getting it right is really the hard part. But these are the things to think about as you start to make this journey and make this voyage into expanding and building your empire. It can be done, folks. But boy, oh boy, it's going to be a rocky road to get there. But man, on the other side, it is joyous. And I've seen the benefits of what happens when brands really click in and figure it out and get the infrastructure and processes in place to be able to play at this level of the game. So be encouraged that this is something you can do. My name is Anthony Standifer. Again, 20 some odd years in this business. I'm happy to answer questions and support you along with your journey. I'm so excited that you've joined me for this episode of Driving the Business, Beauty Brands, and Entrepreneurship with Anthony Standifer. On the screen, you will find all of the social media channels of where I'm available for. On most platforms, I am the Anthony Standifer. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn as Anthony Standifer. This episode is available on all of the listening platforms in addition to YouTube. If you are listening to this particularly, I would love for you to like and subscribe this. It becomes a really great indicator that you're getting value out of this content. And I want to be able to elevate the content here. And your ability to like and subscribe to these episodes is the clearest indicator that I need to invest more time and resources into making this thing grow and provide even more value to you as you make this journey. Thank you to the folks that helped to make this thing happen. There is an entire production team and a village that supports me in the production of this. And so that's everything from the JJ Effect that helps me with the opening reel and the part of this podcast. That includes Roots Recordings that helps me with the production of this. MC Group, my founding company, helps me to make sure that this thing is happening. So again, there's a village that does this, and I'm forever and eternally grateful to the resources and the people that come along this journey with me. Thank you so much. I mean, your listening ear and your eyeballs on this mean the world to me. I hope that you've gotten some value out of this today. Be encouraged wherever you are, and remember to keep driving the business.